What's up, everybody? Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today it is time. I promised that this would happen all the way back in 2019, and as per usual, I'm super freaking slow to keep my promises, but here we are back with episode 38 of Godzilla-Thon. Once again, I gotta give a huge thank you to all of you for all of your support. It is because this channel hit 101,954 subs that I relaunched Godzilla-Thon, and oh my gosh, I gotta tell you, it's been so much fun for me to revisit Godzilla King of the Monsters. I love this movie so much. This movie's like my home. I mean, it is, when I think back on it, it is the coziest little movie for me. I'm so nostalgic for it. I have so much love for it. But beyond that, I just really love it. I think it really does hold up. I know that, like, the fan base is kind of split on it, that particularly on Twitter, there's a decently vocal community of people that, like, don't love Godzilla King of the Monsters, and that's fine. You don't have to. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that a lot of the time, Godzilla King of the Monsters winds up compared to movies that they do like, that they like more than King of the Monsters, and that comparison drives people crazy and makes them dislike it even more. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that this movie's really fantastic. It's a love letter to Godzilla fans. It's a love letter to Godzilla himself. I think it's a great entry in this series, and I cannot wait to revisit it with you guys. I just love this film. Also, I was working on the thumbnail artwork for this back in 2019, and I was so excited about Godzilla King of the Monsters, so many visuals and moments and shots in that movie that I loved so much, that I could not decide which one I wanted to base the thumbnail art on, and so I wound up starting like 8 different thumbnails, and over time, you know, I didn't finish any of them. I never finished any of them. So this is my first thumbnail that I've made working with a thumbnail artist, and I think they killed it. I think that this is awesome. So big shout out. I think it turned out amazing. I love it. And that'll get us into Godzilla King of the Monsters. Godzilla King of the Monsters came out on May 31st, 2019. This was the year I graduated high school, so a big changing point. I graduated like a couple weeks before this movie came out. I was in the middle of grad party mania, so like I just have so many fun memories of around the time this came out. And in fact, I didn't do a grad party. I never had one, but I took a bunch of friends out to see Godzilla King of the Monsters, and that was kind of my grad party celebration. So like I have so many fond memories of seeing this movie with my friends and just with family, and like I saw it so many times. The first time I ever saw it in theaters, it was a little later at night. I saw it in IMAX, and when I got out of the theater, someone came over to me. His name was Kane, and he was a viewer, and he came over and we chatted for a while. He liked the movie. It was very cool to see him and meet him, and I'm very appreciative of him for coming over and saying hi. And not only that, but I wound up being in the exact same auditorium as Gojira-Fan93, who was just there by chance in the same theater as me, and he and I talked about the movie afterwards. So like, I understand that I'm biased. I understand. And this is also the Godzilla movie I'm the most connected to. Not only is it the one that I covered the most extensively and thoroughly, I would argue, because we had the most build up to it, 5 years of build up on the channel, and I was so involved with it and I was so excited about it. It was also a purer time, you know, I was a little less cynical back then, so it was easier to get me hyped. So not only do I have all that, but it's also the movie that, because of you guys, I've had the most experience with, you know, because of the support you guys have given me. I've been able to meet and make great friends with people all over production on Godzilla King of the Monsters. I've met people who were extras on the movie. I've met people who were military consultants on the movie. I've met people who were VFX artists on the movie. I've met VFX supervisors on the movie. I've met actors from the film. I've even met Michael Dougherty, the director of the movie, and it's all because of the support you've given me, and so I cannot thank you enough. It's because of you guys that I have such a strong connection and appreciation for the time period this movie came out. But I don't think that sways my opinion on the film all that much. There's surely part of it, for sure, but I really do love this movie. I think it's fantastic, and I'll explain why as we go through it. There are things that I dislike about it, but on the whole, it really holds up for me. It's just truly the most classic Godzilla film that has come out in the US era, you know? This is the most pure-hearted, classic Godzilla movie that has been made by American filmmakers, and I really love it for that. So that's right, on May 31st, 31st, 2019, Godzilla King of the Monsters came out. It was the 65th anniversary of Godzilla, the 35th Godzilla film, and the third MonsterVerse installment, as well as the third American Godzilla movie after 98 and Godzilla 2014. So it was a big deal, you know, there was a lot going for this film. The fandom and the hype at the time were at an all-time high. I have never experienced anything like this again. The fandom has never had that kind of passion that they had back then. I think in some degree it's because this channel kind of in many ways became a lot more smaller in scale and niche, and that's got a lot to do with the change on the algorithms and all that, and the change in viewer preferences towards more fast food type, like high-paced content, which is not what I love to do. Viewer interests have shifted, and also I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of people grew up and moved on. A lot of the people that used to watch this channel don't anymore because they've grown up, they've moved on to different things in their life, which is also fine. But even still, I don't think that's all of it. I just have never experienced the type of fandom hype that I did back then. The closest we got was Godzilla -1. It was nothing like the King of the Monsters hype. It was unparalleled back then. It was just a pure-hearted fan base. Like, there were leaks and spoilers for sure, but that didn't dominate the fandom culture. Today, I argue that that dominates fandom culture. Always trying to be the first one to scoop information, leak stuff about the movies, putting Mothra in your thumbnail for your GXK videos months before the movie's even out. You know, I think there's a big shift in attitude, and there was a little bit of that back in 2018, 2019, but on the whole, it was a fandom just excited and hungry to speculate and to experience the film together. Like, spoilers were rampant, yes. That for sure was an issue that I dealt with because obviously covering news and such, people would comment spoilers, but the fandom attitude around spoilers was very different. It was a fandom that was just excited to get the movie, not excited to get the scoop. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was a different type of fan base experience, and if you were a part of it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We were at an all-time high. It was great. It was so cool, and we had so much mainstream coverage. You know, comic book YouTubers of all sizes covering Godzilla. Godzilla King of the Monsters was considered to be the movie that won Comic-Con 2018 with the trailer, that beautiful trailer. Actually, not the beautiful trailer. That was actually the third one that came out. That was the title of the trailer, was beautiful. Obviously, it was the Claire de Lune trailer, the SDCC trailer, but it was a very different type of fan base back then. I think maybe it was because the internet was a little more underdeveloped back then as well, which is a wild thing to say because it really wasn't that long ago, but it was a very different internet back then. But here we were. I was at my peak, the fandom was at its peak, and we were all ready and hungry because the Toho Big Four were back. It was finally happening. For decades, fans had been begging for Toho Godzilla characters to be adapted into the US space, mostly I would say because Hollywood's budgets were a lot bigger, and so you could do a lot more with the characters, especially with CGI, that you couldn't do back in the day, and people wanted that Hollywood treatment, the big budget, the very nice fanfare that Hollywood movies can deliver, and it was finally happening. We were getting a reimagining of all of these characters, and not to mention, it was their first time showing up since 2004 in Godzilla Final War. And if we're being really specific about King Ghidorah himself, he hadn't shown up since the rebirth of Mothra 3. In a Godzilla movie, he hadn't shown up since 1991. It was a long time coming. And at the helm was director Michael Dougherty, who was a pretty niche director, pretty small time coming off the back of Trick or Treat and Krampus. Dougherty, though, had a very, very prevalent social media fan base. You know, he was very popular on social media. It really endeared him to the fans. It was a purely golden age. I loved it. I loved being a part of it, and it leads us to the movie. That movie brought me to tears before it even started, with a classic reference that shouldn't have hit as hard as it did because it was used in Shin Godzilla just a couple years prior, but the classic Godzilla footsteps followed by the roar, it was great, mostly because it was the updated Godzilla. You know, it's the Hollywood Godzilla. You hear the Godzilla footsteps, the US Godzilla footsteps, but then the Toho roar, are you kidding me? It just set the tone of this movie immediately, stating boldly to the audience that this movie is a love letter to Godzilla fans, and it was paying back all of it. I understand that, again, I'm like really hammering home my personal connection to this movie, which maybe invalidates my review to some people, but again, I think that as I'll go through it, the movie does stand on its own. But it felt like this movie couldn't have come at a better time for me. You know, it was like I had celebrated my fandom more than ever since the 2014 film had come out. I was no longer embarrassed to be a Godzilla fan. I was no longer getting made fun of for being a Godzilla fan. And I, on the channel, had just accomplished my Godzilla-Thon, reviewing all the Godzilla films, diving deep into all of them. And then for this movie to be this giant love letter to all the films that came before, all 35 Godzilla movies, it was just really, really perfect for me. And that's why so many people have such a strong connection to it, because it wasn't just for me. A lot of fans went through something similar. 2014 reinvigorated their love, or in some cases started their love for Godzilla, and here was King of the Monsters celebrating it with them, saying that it's okay to be a Godzilla fan, and here's something to celebrate. Here's a payback to all the things you love. We're giving tribute to it all. I'm so thankful for this movie for that. But let's get into the film as a film. I think it's really cool the way the movie even just begins. Again, it kind of sets a different tone than the rest of the MonsterVerse, as we begin on the Warner Bros. And Legendary logos, but they're revamped for this movie. They're all cool looking, and importantly, they feature hints of Titans that are either going to show up in this film or be hinted at in this film, and it instantly, before the movie even begins, sets the tone for the audience and tells the viewer, pay close attention. World building is going to be a big deal, and Easter eggs are going to be all over. The fan service is something that is very debated about this movie. Like, is it overly fan service heavy? Maybe so. We'll talk about it, in particular with the Oxygen Destroyer, but maybe a little bit. Some of the Easter eggs are a little confusing, but some of them, most of them, are really great. They're just there to be payback tributes to the fans, to be things for us to discover. And this movie instantly told us to pay close attention and look for small details and really engage, because there's going to be Easter eggs and world building and lore all over the place. So focus up. And I love that. I think that's fantastic. I love it when movies do that. We start the movie returning to San Francisco in 2014, a cool way to get us back into the MonsterVerse, as it had been 5 years since the last Godzilla movie came out, and we are on the ground in this orange city. It looks nothing like it did in Godzilla 2014, which I think was another statement from the filmmakers trying to be like, look, you're going to be able to see this one. You know, the big complaints about 2014 was that it was so dark and you couldn't see anything and whatever, and I think that they were trying to immediately tell the viewer, like, it's okay, you're going to be able to see the monsters in this movie. So they start with a shot of Godzilla, you know, and then you're in a very orange version of San Francisco, very well lit. Godzilla's right there prominent in front of you. I, as a fan of continuity, would have preferred a more visually consistent San Francisco with the 2014 film. I don't even care that Godzilla's not necessarily in a location that makes a ton of sense, given where Ford Brody is falling in the sky, and when he sees Godzilla, he's got a long way down. Godzilla can run over there, I guess, you know? I'm not even as concerned about that, but one thing that has always stuck out to me as a little odd is they have a weird hybrid Godzilla design, somewhat between the 2014 and 2019 Godzilla design featured in this opening flashback. I think it would have been really awesome if it was a Nightmare Godzilla design, like the Nightmare Gamera from Gamera 3, where you flash back and Gamera looks horrifying and you can understand why someone would be so afraid of him because that's how they perceive him. This is a memory, and a memory of the San Francisco attack where Godzilla killed your son. You could picture him as being truly terrifying, and yet it's just weirdly not. It's like the most mellow of the Godzilla designs. He's a half-breed between 2014 and 2019 in a way that doesn't do anything for the world or lore, but was just, I think, a VFX cheat code to try and speed up the process, where they didn't want to have to bring in and update the Godzilla 2014 design because, of course, 5 years had gone by. You'd have to retexture that guy. You'd have to make sure he's up to date for modern VFX software, which eventually they'll have to do anyways for Monarch Legacy of Monsters. But back in the day, I think it was just trying to speed it up, you know, get to the point. And so they used an earlier version of their 2019 design before they landed on the finalized design. Long ramble aside, we start out in the San Francisco flashback. I think it's a great framing device with the Russell family on the ground as Godzilla essentially kills their son. We don't see it on screen, but their son Andrew has died here. It's a great framing device to get us back into the world, to remind us of where we left off, to immediately establish the stakes, and to establish the character dynamics and why they feel the way they do about Godzilla. It was all great, really well done. We jump forward to 2019, where we go from orange to very blue. I really like the color palette of this movie. I know some people criticize it because it's so strong. I really like it because it keeps the movie visually fresh as it moves along. It also plays into the elemental angle of the movie. The fire, the water, the coldness, the greens, the orange, the reds. I think it's really cool in the way it really plays into the elemental side of things. And the monsters in this movie are treated more as elemental gods than ever before, which is super cool. cool. So yeah, we jump to 2019. We find out the world is rebuilding from Titans pretty well. I love the continuity right off the bat. We find out that Monarch is on blast. There's protests in the street, people demanding to destroy all monsters, and there is a Godzilla hunt underway by the military that is killing whales all over the place. Again, just more subtle setups for the future. You know, obviously this is the oxygen destroyer they're telling us about without telling us. It's really interesting. Emma and Madison Russell find themselves finishing up breakfast. Madison actually burns the breakfast, so they barely get to eat it. And then, after a little discussion about Mark Russell, their father, who we immediately establish is divorced from them and separated, he's been emailing Madison. After a brief discussion about that, the ground rumbles and we hear Mothra's classic roar. That gave me goosebumps the first time. The fact they're embracing the lineage of Godzilla and Mothra in such a bold and earnest way was so cool. We see the Temple of the Moth. It looks great. I love it. And after that, we find out Emma has finished her device, the Orca, and she plans to use it today. Unfortunately, this movie does double down on one of the things that I did not love about Godzilla 2014, and one of my bigger issues with the MonsterVerse overall, which is that, you know, there's a big debate in this fandom over if Godzilla King of the Monsters is pro-nuclear. I don't think it is at all. I understand why people think that, because Serizawa used a nuclear bomb to revive Godzilla, supercharge him, and it's in this movie presented as Godzilla becoming the hero, you know, Godzilla powers up and it's a very heroic moment. I think the thing people aren't realizing is the nuke in this movie is used as a scientific tool, not a weapon. This movie very, very clearly has a very strong environmental message, and claiming that this movie's pro-nuclear completely goes in the face of the blatant environmentalism in this film. Like, you have to completely ignore all of the environmental context of this movie to have that opinion and just focus on the specific moment where Serizawa uses that nuclear bomb. The nuclear bomb is used as a scientific tool, not a weapon, and this movie is very clearly very critical of the military. Very clearly, this movie views the military as essentially a bunch of meatheads who cause problems, and the movie presents the heroes, the superheroes, as the scientists. Just as Ishiro Honda used to always do. The scientists in this movie are the good guys, and it's when you give a nuke to a scientist and let them use it for science and not as a weapon that it can do any sort of good. That's more of how the movie uses it. But one thing that kind of has always stuck out to me as an issue with the MonsterVerse is that the MonsterVerse, in many ways other than that, does kind of contradict the entire point of the Godzilla series. Godzilla is a warning of our tampering with nuclear weapons. He is nature's revenge on mankind for the nuclear bomb. And Godzilla 2014, whose fault that is? Probably the DOJ. You know, when they stepped in to help produce Godzilla 2014, they really changed a lot of that movie's core themes and messages and changed the way the military was going to be portrayed and all of this stuff. And one of the bigger changes to Godzilla's lore is that he is now a naturally occurring monster. He always has existed. We find out that the Earth used to be 10 times more radioactive and the monsters in the past used to feed on that radiation. I wish this movie didn't have to double down on that and make it so overt. If we had left it where we left it, that's one thing. But to double down on it and explain every monster is an atomic monster, but there is no messaging to it, is a huge misstep. All of the Toho monsters in the Showa series are atomic monsters because mankind's been destroying the planet with nuclear weapons, and it's a warning about how we should maybe not do that. Actually, they're horrible. It's a horrible thing that causes good, innocent people to die. And in these movies, it's just like, they're all radioactive, and that's good. We never explore it in a meaningful way. It's brushed off, and in this movie, they kind of alter it to try and make it its own thing, but I don't think it really works all that effectively. I bring all this up because as they're entering Mothra's temple and explaining that she's about to, you know, hatch from her cocoon, they bring up the fact that radiation levels are spiking around Mothra, which would be interesting if Mothra was a radioactive mutant, but none of the monsters in the MonsterVerse are mutants. They're all naturally occurring creatures, and there's no messaging to it in this context. Later we find out they put an environmental spin on it, but it's not the environmental spin that Godzilla fans have come to expect. It's a very different, weird type, very fantasy type. All that to say, that's one of the things that I take issue with this movie on, is doubling down on all of the Titans being radioactive monsters. I think it makes them all infinitely less interesting if they've all just, there's tons of them that have existed. If Godzilla's not a unique creature, but instead just one of many, and all of these radioactive monsters exist, and Godzilla's not even uniquely radioactive anymore. I think it does undercut a lot of the monster's impact. So that is one critique I'll give. But this whole sequence I think is fantastic. I love the atmosphere of it. I love the mood of it. I love the reverence of it as Mothra is born. It's a great moment. I really like the new caterpillar design, Mothra larva design. The old designs are very classic, but they're also very simple. And I like that this new one looks a little meaner, a little more combat ready, a little more monstrous. I really like that aspect of it. The old one literally looks like a little worm. I like that the new one is unique. It is a monster, and Mothra looks great. Her containment grid is immediately hacked. I appreciate that they're doing the world building, saying yes, Monarch does still have containment grids, and in fact a failsafe to kill Mothra, which I believe she probably would have died. She was very small and feeble when she was born, so she probably would have been killed, and I think that's also great. But their containment system is hacked. Mothra starts to panic and starts to fight the guards around her. She hucks one of them into a giant spider's web with a giant spider in it. That's very out of nowhere. I really like that fantasy element randomly thrown in there. Of course, Mothra's always been a fantasy character, so it really works in her setting. Emma rushes in and uses the orca to calm Mothra down, and Madison and Mothra then share a little moment as Madison rushes in after Emma, and as she reaches for Mothra in this beautiful shot, the classic Yuji Koseki Mothra theme plays, and that brought me to tears. It was just so moving to have that theme brought back. It was so powerful, and it's such a great scene. I also love the new adaptation they've given Mothra with the bioluminescence. Her changing from blue when she's like at peace to red when she's scared is so cool. The glowing effect is fantastic, makes her feel more mythical, and it plays into like back in the day. That's how Little Godzilla used to work, you know? In the Heisei series, Little Godzilla had the same kind of bioluminescence, but it was with his eyes. Actually, I think it's with his whole body in the first movie, but I was just a cool connection. I loved that stuff. Alan Jonah then bursts into the outpost, storms in, exploding the wall, killing all of the Monarch people. I got a comment on a video recently that cracked me up. It was from this woman. She commented just a time code, like I don't even remember what it was like 10 minutes 14 seconds or something, you know? And she comments, essentially, to paraphrase, it was like, I don't understand that scene, because wouldn't the bomb have killed the little girl if the little girl didn't run into that room? Why would the mother allow that to happen? And I had no context for what this is talking about, because they timestamped the movie Godzilla King of the Monsters, not my video. I don't even remember what video it was on. I think it was a King of the Monsters related video, but they timestamped the part of the movie, not the part of my video where like any footage of that played or anything. So I had to go to the movie to find out what they were talking about. And I do think that's a funny thing to bring up, is that if Madison didn't rush in there to try and calm Mothra down with her mom, or to be there with her mother, Madison would have been exploded just like all the rest. I'm sure Jonah would have spared her, you know, obviously when he walks in and he kills that scientist, he would have spared Madison. Maybe he even had an inside guard giving him the all clear that Madison is out of the danger zone. Maybe Emma orchestrated it, running in there to calm Mothra down, knowing Madison would follow, and so she knew Madison would be safe. I think most likely, Alan Jonah did not really care one way or the other. It's very possible the bomb does kill Madison. It's maybe even possible it kills Emma. Ultimately, he wanted the orca, and Emma Russell was more of just she was a bonus. He didn't need her. Technically, she's the one that operates the orca, but maybe one of his scientists or he could have figured out how to use it anyways, you know? So I don't know. I think the honest answer is he's a villain, and he wasn't being all that cautious. He was just going in there and getting the job done. At this point in the story, it does seem that Emma and Madison are kidnapped, although later we find out that's not the case, and the orca is taken away by this new eco-terrorist, Alan Jonah, who's fantastic, played by Charles Dance, instantly commands a presence. Charles Dance is such a strong screen presence, he's great. Serizawa gets word of this during a Senate hearing about how essentially the Senate's like, we're about to give over Monarch to the military so that they can exterminate the Titans, because you cannot give us one good reason not to do that, which again, great world building. I love that stuff. Serizawa then just gets up and leaves, kind of showing that Monarch from the outside perspective looks very irresponsible, and he recruits Mark Russell. Mark Russell, who was one of Monarch's very prominent members, who retired after 2014 after the death of his son, and who struggled a lot with his own health over the years, and is now at a place where he's a lot more, I would say, at peace. Like, he's no longer an alcoholic, he's getting himself together, but he just wants to live secluded in the woods and to study his little animals. And now he's being brought back in because, as the designer of the orca, they plan to have Mark track the orca down, and in the process he can find and save his family. So he rejoins Monarch, and here Mark learns that there are 17 Titans after Godzilla that have been discovered by Monarch, and counting, some of which were in deep hibernation, but all of which have been contained at secret Monarch outposts, which I think is great. Again, love that world building, love the premise, love the setup for like where we thought we were going, where we were going to get the 17 Titans in the future of the MonsterVerse, and it was just a very, very cool world to set this film in. I thought that was great. I also love that it's like a bunch of mystery, we don't get to see them all, so it was really cool. Mark is taken to Outpost 54 titled Castle Bravo. This is one of those Easter eggs that I think is a little silly. I can get why they'd call it Outpost 54 because, first of all, it could just be the 54th outpost. Secondly, it's very possible that Monarch named it that way as a code name, tying it back to Godzilla. Castle Bravo, obviously, that was the bomb they used against him in 54, so that's why they would call it that. But it's in Bermuda. It's in the Atlantic Ocean, way, way away from where the real Castle Bravo happened. I always thought that this was in the Pacific near where the Castle Bravo test happened, and that's where Godzilla lived, but not true. Godzilla apparently lives in the Atlantic, kind of around the Bermuda Triangle area, which maybe he's responsible for some of those disappearances, who knows. The outpost was built to track and study Godzilla on his home turf, and it contains the severed head of the female Muto from 2014. I love Monarch's new base and the technology. The undersea base is so freaking cool. It's a really cool way to get to see how much Monarch has progressed from the last film, and they're really upgrading, and they're really more competent this time around. Also, love the continuity there with the Muto head being recovered. That would definitely be something that would be like a hot item where people would be fighting over who gets to keep the remains of those monsters and study and sell them and, all that stuff. So I think that's great. Mark then, during a meeting, redirects Monarch from defending Mothra as they're worried Alan Jonah is going to go after Mothra, and instead he has them focus on all the other Titan locations, because if Alan Jonah has the Orca, he can wake up any of them at any time, and it's very likely he set Mothra up as a diversion and is going after a different, more powerful Titan. That is the first instance of my true biggest issue with Godzilla King of the Monsters. I understand making Mark the protagonist. I understand giving him things to do. I understand giving him this moment where he redirects them from this wild goose chase. What is silly to me is that it's always at the expense of the people around him, or at least almost always. Almost always, Mark seems to be the only competent one in the room. Like, you're telling me not one G-Force worker thought the same thing? Like, not one G-Force commander who has battle military experience and combat strategy experience is like, hey, it seems like if he wanted Mothra, he would have taken her already. He already was there at the place where she was at. It seems likely he would have grabbed her while he was there. It's very likely he just wanted the Orca. You're telling me not one of them put that piece together? Nobody but Mark thought of that? It's always done in a way where Mark comes across smarter because the rest of the characters come across dumber than him. Sometimes you really see his animal biology. It shows in a way that it makes sense. Mark has a background in biology. It sometimes makes sense how he can study the behavioral patterns of a monster and understand its intentions. That does track. Other times, it's like, why is he the one solving this problem? That's how I've always felt about it. I've always felt like Mark gets too many moments where he corrects other people or where he tells people what to do that should know what to do instead of him. And this is just the first instance of that. Meanwhile, Jonah attacks Outpost 32 in Antarctica, capturing the three-headed dragon frozen in ice known as Monster Zero. I love the way Ghidorah is frozen. He looks fantastic. Jonah's men then start to drill into the ice, placing these charges inside so that they can blow it up so that they can free Ghidorah, which actually causes Godzilla to appear at Castle Bravo, flashing an intimidation display. I love this sequence. I think it's fantastic. The tension is palpable. The visuals are beautiful. The majesty's on full display. But you know what? Mark should not have made all of the calls. Mark is the one that tells Monarch to stand down and lower their guns. Mark is the one that tells them to open the blast shield so Godzilla knows they're not a threat. That should be Dr. Serizawa's job, the Godzilla specialist, and Mark should back him up and be like, as the animal guy and the guy who hates Godzilla, I have a non-biased perspective here. Serizawa's actually right about this. Or even if they alternate, or if Serizawa's the one that tells them to stand down, Godzilla's not here as a threat, and then Mark is the one who's like, you want to prove he's not a threat? Open the blast shield so he doesn't think we're afraid of him or defending ourselves or whatever, If that had happened, it would have made Serizawa and Mark feel more like equals rather than Serizawa literally taking orders from Mark during this scene. That's one of my biggest long-term issues with this movie, is that Mark gets too much to do and gets to tell too many people what to do, including Serizawa. Are you kidding me? Serizawa, the Godzilla expert, should know that like the back of his hand, But the intimidation display scene is beautiful. And then Mark does a very great thing, which is a Mark Russell thing. This is something he absolutely should have been the guy to do, which is bring up Godzilla's behavioral routes. Show me Godzilla's territorial routes and his normal behavior, and then Mark analyzes it and realizes that the only diversion Godzilla's made has been to Antarctica and now back to Castle Bravo, meaning there's danger in Antarctica. They do a course projection, it seems that's where Godzilla's heading, and it's like, okay, Mark has used his knowledge, a skill set he would have, which I guess all three of these instances is a skill set he would have, but in a way that wouldn't one-up Serizawa, in a way that Serizawa would probably be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess Serizawa is more of a biologist, whereas Mark is more of a behavioral analyst. It makes sense for Serizawa to be like, oh, good call, Mark, on this one. Do you see what I'm saying? I think that they should have been a little bit more of equals. That's always been my real biggest issue with this movie, is that giving Mark things to do at the expense of others. But this is a great moment. I love that Mark tracks Godzilla's territorial routes, and that's how they know they're going to Antarctica. I also love the tension in the room when people hear they're going to Antarctica, and it's like, uh-oh, they're waking up that one? That's the worst one that they could wake up. And obviously it's because Emma knows all of the Titans. I believe in canon, I think she was with the team that discovered Ghidorah, or maybe that was Vivian Graham. It's been a minute since I've studied the King of the Monsters canon. I actually think that was Dr. Graham. But either way, it makes sense that Emma would know about Ghidorah. It also makes sense that Emma would be able to give Jonah the proper transmission code so he could land at Outpost 32 in the first place. So all of that's great. I really love all of that. On their way to Antarctica, they study all of the myths and history of the MonsterVerse. Another thing I love is the way this movie ties in real myths with made-up ones for the movie. It's a great way to build the lore of this universe. And here, Monarch learns that Ghidorah, or as they call him, Monster Zero, might be a rival alpha to Godzilla. They think he's like part of the food chain and was a potential alternate rival King of the Monsters to Godzilla, which isn't technically true, as we'll later find out. Ghidorah's more of, an alien conqueror. He's less of a rival alpha and more of, he's here to terraform the planet. Like, I guess he commands the other Titans, so in a way he is the alpha. I just think that this movie, in retrospect, in particular because of the novelization and external canon, the concept of the alpha has been overblown in a way that I don't even think this movie supports. I'm very critical of the whole alpha plotline, mostly because alpha wolves don't actually exist. I understand that Mark Russell brings it up and it's a major plot point later in this very movie, that all animals, I guess, respond to an alpha, and Ghidorah is their new alpha. Because of that scene, I can understand why they go the route they do, where they make it so literal, but like, that's not even a real concept in nature. So I don't love that we emphasize that. I particularly don't love where they take it from here, where that becomes the root conflict of every fight Godzilla has, and it strips Godzilla of any nuance, and it strips all the other Titans of any nuance. Again, critical of that aspect of this as well. But I love that they study myths to find out the history of Ghidorah. He's something of a rival alpha to Godzilla. And I also love that Godzilla disappears en route to Ghidorah. Here we find out Dr. Stanton theorizes that Dr. Brooks was right all along. Great connection to Kong Skull Island. Godzilla has been using the Hollow Earth to travel. Here in this movie, it's explained the Hollow Earth as a series of subterranean tunnels with open pockets. I think that's a far more compelling explanation, a far more realistic explanation of what the Hollow Earth is, but also a far less suitable one for sequels and spin-offs set in the Hollow Earth. So I understand why they make the change they do. I'm a big fan of the Hollow Earth as presented in this film, and then I love Axis Mundi, but I get why they make the changes they do. But it is important to note that the Hollow Earth is explained very different here, and given the actual way the Hollow Earth really works, I don't understand how Godzilla could possibly use it to speed up his travel around the Earth by this much. Because he has to go to the Hollow Earth and then he's just got to walk around anyways, trudge around where he could be attacked by monsters. Makes him vulnerable. Whereas if it's a series of tunnels, as is presented here, it makes a lot more sense that he could zip through, like, basically skipping sections of the Earth to get to the next section of the Earth in a way that makes much more sense to me. But that's just me. Everyone dismisses Stanton, which I've never understood. Like, how is it that Brooks essentially proves Hollow Earth and Kong Skull Island, but people dismiss him? It's one of those things where the external lore explains this, but I don't love having external lore explain everything. Luckily, this is not that big of a detail, but basically, the answer is just that Monarch has very much believes that the Earth under Skull Island is hollow and that there are small pockets of Earth that are hollow, but they don't believe in the hollow Earth tunnels, and they certainly don't believe that the planet itself is housing a giant other planet inside of it. You know, they certainly don't believe that, but they do believe some pockets are hollowed out, which is how Serizawa presents it in the first movie as well. So it makes sense, actually, you know, that the way Serizawa believes it is in the first movie is how he still believes it is, because Kong Skull Island takes place before the first movie. Monarch takes the Argo jet to Antarctica. It's our biggest technological leap in this movie, and one that I don't think it comes all that much out of nowhere. Like, having a giant, essentially flying aircraft carrier is a very sci-fi concept. It's unrealistic, but it's not world-breaking to me. I think it's really cool. I think that is a great step in the right direction towards building up to a Mechagodzilla. I think we'd need a Super X and maybe some other tech before we can get there, but whatever. The Argo jet, I think, is pretty cool. They take it to Antarctica, and they deploy G-Team, this movie's take on G-Force, Monarch's military division, which technically isn't part of Monarch, but they are working directly with Monarch. They're essentially Monarch's military division, and G-Team lands and tries to take back the outpost, and it leads to a big battle with Jonah's militia as they ambush G-Team. Mark goes in after his family during all the chaos, but just before he can rescue them, as he does find them and catches them, Emma steps in, stopping him, warning him to run, and then detonates the ice charges, unleashing Ghidorah. The entire facility starts to come apart around them. Jonah Allen takes Emma Russell and Madison, gets out of there. As Mark tries to rescue G-Team, Ghidorah is freed from the ice. Emma then uses the Orca to awaken him, and Ghidorah goes on the attack, rising up in a fantastic sequence, showcasing the size, scale, and fear factor of Ghidorah. It's so cool. I love the way he attacks. It's really neat. It's the perfect King Ghidorah design. Like, I think that there are tiny changes that I like from some of the other ones. I always like when they give Ghidorah kind of the crescent moon on his head, and I like some of the things they do with the horns in some of the other movies, you know? I like some of the tiny design details, but on the whole, this is perfect. I guess the necks could be a little longer, but in some shots, they appear longer than others, so that's fine, you know? I really love this Ghidorah design, and finally, technology has caught up to the concept of King Ghidorah. We finally can use CGI to make Ghidorah feel like a true global world-ending threat in a way that he just doesn't come across as in other movies. He comes across as very silly and clumsy in the Showa series. The heads always bobbling around, knocking into each other. They never feel intentional. The Heisei series does a much better job with that, but he still doesn't feel like a global threat. He doesn't even feel nearly as powerful as Godzilla, you know? The Millennium series, I guess, with Kaiser Ghidorah kind of tries, but Kaiser Ghidorah has such a limited amount of screen time and really doesn't accomplish much, so again, it's more of the Exilian threat in that movie than Ghidorah himself. Finally, Ghidorah himself is presented as a world-ending threat that is equally powerful to Godzilla, a monster that could realistically kill Godzilla and destroy the planet, and we have CGI to make the heads move in intentional ways. They're not bobbling around anymore. They have personality. Michael Dougherty took great care to give each head their own personality, brilliantly portrayed by Jason Liles, Alan Maxson, and Richard Dorton. Obviously, Richard Dorton's Kevin, the left head, is the most famous and iconic of the heads. The more curious head, which the fan base has taken as the more silly one, but he's the more curious head, the right head, which is more angry and combat ready at all times, and then the middle head, which is the leader and in many ways the more mature and strategical head. And you see that brilliantly displayed in this scene, as I love that Kevin's getting distracted. He's looking around like he's not always paying attention in a way where he's not fully aggressive, but that middle head is, and so it keeps grabbing him and trying to get him back on mission. The right head's just eagerly waiting to attack the whole time. One thing I think would have been a cool detail, which they didn't include in this movie, but I've always thought it would have been a cool detail, is if the right head used its gravity beams more often and was always ready to attack faster. If whenever they unleashed the gravity beams, the right head might go first, I think that would be cool. But either way, I love the idea of giving each head their own personality. I love the new design. I love those rattlesnake tails. I love the scales. I love the color. I know some people wish he was more vibrant gold. I don't care. I think he looks fantastic. I love it because it also allows the lightning to still have impact, you know? If he was more vibrant gold, I think the yellow lightning wouldn't stand out as much, and it does. It stands out in a really cool way. It's super neat. I really love it. He's also huge. He's enormous. I love the size of him. And that's right, Ghidorah unleashes the gravity beams, and it's so epic. I don't know how we've never thought of this in Godzilla films before, but giving other monsters a charge up like Godzilla has, where Godzilla's spines charge up before he shoots his atomic breath, giving that kind of thing to other monsters is so cool. Having Ghidorah glow through his necks before the gravity beams unleash is a brilliant idea, and it looks fantastic on screen. I love the way the gravity beams work in this movie as well. The way they move is so cool. Just before Ghidorah kills all of our main Monarch crew and all of our main characters, Godzilla arrives bursting up through the ice, ready to fight his oldest rival with the song Old Rivals playing. Bear McCreary kills it in this movie. The soundtrack is really thoughtfully done. It's many people's favorite soundtrack of the MonsterVerse. I love the instrumentation. I love the thought process that went into the instrumentation, you know, taking time to make different songs cultural, you know, like giving different instrumentations from different cultures to different monsters to make them all feel like they are distinct and from different parts of the planet. It's really neat. It's very nice. The chanting is my probably biggest issue with it, where it's a little much at times. We chant a lot in this soundtrack, and maybe that's one of the areas I've always thought is overdone, which I still understand the point of it is to make them feel like gods, to play into the fact that these monsters are gods. You know, I do think that they maybe were a little heavy-handed with the chanting, but then the most impressive thing McCreary does is taking music like Yuji Koseki's Mothra theme, a song that Ifukube always struggled to integrate into his own films. Ifukube always struggled to get that song naturally into his own films. I think the best example that he does with it is Godzilla vs. Mothra 1992. He does a really good job with that song in that movie. But, you know, in the Showa series, he really struggled with that song. He didn't want to compose the original Mothra because he didn't think he had the whimsy for it. And when he takes Mothra back on, he gives Mothra, you know, my favorite Mothra theme, Sacred Springs, but it's a very somber, beautiful, mellow one. Yuji Koseki's Mothra theme is energetic and exciting and passionate and fun, and Bear McCreary takes that and integrates it into an epic, grand, moody soundtrack in a way that it perfectly fits. It's not out of place at all. It's beautifully used. And Ifukube's Godzilla music is so classic that it's so distinct. The instrumentation of it has also remained so consistent. It really stands out in a movie like Godzilla Minus One with a very ethereal soundtrack. Godzilla Minus One soundtrack, it's so ethereal. And then the Ifukube music kicks on and it's like, whoa, classic Godzilla moment. It works in that movie, but this movie does something even more impressive in my opinion, which is to update and modernize the instrumentation, the tempo, the tone of that music to have it fit in broader songs. This song, Old Rivals, features the Ifukube Godzilla main announcement statement, you know, but it features it in a way where it doesn't come across as out of place. It's totally naturally integrated into this song, and then the song moves on from it into a battle theme. That's really impressive, using Ghidorah's new motif and some of the fight motifs. Really impressive, being able to seamlessly transition from Ifukube into other music. I love it, and that made me tear up when I saw this movie for the first time. I could not believe the use of Godzilla's theme being so freaking cool. Godzilla's great in this scene as well. I love how angry he is. He immediately, after squaring off with Ghidorah, and some of the most beautiful shots in this whole movie, immediately guns for the kill shot. Godzilla's like, clearly you're seeing the rage of Ghidorah being back and the experience of having fought this monster before all at once visually. Godzilla immediately goes for the heads, knowing that that's Ghidorah's weak point and he's got to take these things out. He's not trying to fight Ghidorah like a boxer. He's not trying to like learn his moves. There's implied history through the way they fight. Ghidorah also is very aware of Godzilla when they recreate that 2014 atomic breath moment, which I think is very fun. Ghidorah dodges it, you know, he's agile. The heads are very agile and mobile here, which is really cool. But beyond that, Ghidorah's experienced with Godzilla. He knows this guy's tricks, and Godzilla knows Ghidorah's. He just can't keep up with him. It's so great. I appreciate that Ghidorah is able to outmaneuver and overpower Godzilla, but I've always felt the defeat should be a little more definitive. Like, Godzilla should be a little more definitively beaten. He gets back up before Ghidorah retreats, but it's technically the Argo jet that chases Ghidorah off, as the Argo jet and a squadron of military fighter jets swing in shooting missiles at Ghidorah and overwhelms him. Michael Dougherty has always said, like, this is Ghidorah's first time out of the ice in thousands of years. He's still getting his bearings. He's not even, like, fully conscious yet. And so that's why he takes off, to basically get his bearings in the sky. I've always felt that Ghidorah should probably take off from the Argo jet alone, or from just simply thinking he's defeated Godzilla, shoving him down the chasm. I've always felt that Godzilla should get a little more definitively beaten here, but one thing that I really love is that Godzilla does not win this fight. It is the very first time in King Ghidorah's history that he beats Godzilla in a fight. The closest we've ever gotten was Mecha King Ghidorah defeating Godzilla at the end of the 1991 movie, but that was more of a stalemate. I guess Kaiser Ghidorah, but that's not even the same thing as King Ghidorah. It's a totally different monster. So this is the first time King Ghidorah properly gets a victory on Godzilla, and it was well earned. It's been way too long. You know, if Ghidorah is supposed to be the biggest threat Godzilla ever faces, he better be able to defeat him, and I appreciate that this movie allows him that. During this battle, Dr. Graham is unceremoniously killed and eaten by King Ghidorah. I cannot believe it, man. That I've always felt was so disrespectful. It feels mean-spirited the way she's killed. Like, for some reason, I, get the sense that Michael Dougherty did not like her character in the 2014 film, or was taking out some of his feelings on the 2014 film, which is a movie he really likes, by killing her in this way. It feels mean-spirited. I get that it makes Ghidorah feel way more threatening and scary that he eats people. I also get that it builds up the threat of having one of our, what we would perceive as main characters, die to Ghidorah so abruptly. It seemingly raises the stakes, but I've never found it to be all that effective, because I've never thought that, like, Mark Russell was in any danger, the way that I felt that the cast of Kong Skull Island was truly expendable, and could any of them be killed at any time. It just feels like a mean-spirited, out-of-nowhere death for her. It feels really brutal. I've always disliked the way she dies there. But anyways, the Argo comes in, chases off Ghidorah. One of the Argo's stray missiles winds up striking the ground, knocking Mark out as Godzilla rises again, and Mark wakes up on the Argo jet, heading to Isla de Mara in Mexico, where he finds out that's where Jonah Allen is expected to go next. There's a Titan there that's called Rodan that they're looking into, They're going after this Titan in a volcano. Then Emma calls the Argo jet. I actually think it's technically broadcast to all of Monarch, but Emma calls in, and this is where we get some exposition. And it's done in a way that I think could be considered way too overtly by some. It's like they overplay their hand, I guess. Like, I know my brother's never the biggest fan of this scene. I love it. I think it's great. I first of all love Emma's speech. I also love the little montage that plays out. Is it silly that she took time to edit a montage? I guess so, but she's been cooking on this theory for 5 years. It makes sense that at some point she'd want to share it with Monarch, but essentially she plans on saving the planet, because the planet is dying. It is dying, definitively. In the real world, not in the Godzilla movie, the planet Earth is dying, and humanity is the cause. We are destroying our planet at a level the planet has never experienced before with any other species. It seems entirely likely that the mass extinction of humanity will be at our own hands, whether it's through our horrible treatment of the environment, or our creation of something like AI, or the atomic bomb itself. Humanity is the biggest threat to the planet Earth. And in this movie, they're also the biggest threat to the Titans, and the Titans are part of the Earth's natural ecosystem. The Titans embody the ecosystem as a whole. They represent nature as itself. And so Emma realizes that in order to save the Titans from military extinction and restore nature's balance, something that Godzilla apparently is not really all that interested in if you're objective about the MonsterVerse. Godzilla's interested in other things. That's topics I've covered in other videos, but the damage humanity has done needs to be corrected. So she plans on doing that by awakening the Titans to save the mass extinction by wiping out this is the flaw in her plan. She's going to allow humans to die in order to save the planet as a whole. That's the flaw in her plan. There is an argument to be made that Titans should be awakened. They shouldn't be awakened under these circumstances. They shouldn't be awakened and forced upon humanity humanity in destructive and devastating ways. They could have easily woken up Behemoth and brought Behemoth into the rainforest and led Behemoth somewhere Behemoth could live. This is why I think the MonsterVerse ultimately needs a monster island, a place for the surface monsters to live, but there is a way that they could have done this right. I think that's a great point. Like, the Monster Island thing is how you would do this right. Emma, she rushes it. She makes a very, very irresponsible and downright devastating decision to awaken the Titans and allow them to cause major destruction. And yes, there is an objective argument to be made that the destruction of human cities and populations could have a benefit on the environment. That is still the morally wrong thing to do, which is what this movie's making the argument of. I think it's a much more nuanced take on themes previously explored in films like Godzilla vs. Ghidorah. I think this movie does a much better job with these concepts. It's very nuanced. I think there's a lot of people out there that see what Emma Russell's talking about and can go, I get it. I understand what she means. I get why she's doing this. For her, she realizes that the Mutos awakened because of humanity's destruction of the environment, and they killed her son. In order to make sure that more sons don't die randomly during random Titan attacks as they wake up to try and reclaim the planet, but by that point it's too late, she's gonna force the planet to just heal, and yes, people will die. They're gonna awaken Titans. But in the long term, her hope is that the planet will restore itself so well that the monsters do not have to awaken and destroy humanity any longer. That's, I think, ultimately her true goal here. Which, again, flawed, but I get it. It's like Thanos, where it's like, I can at least understand what Thanos thought he was going to accomplish. Does the plan fully make sense? No, not really, but I get what he thought he was doing. This is, however, where I think the movie makes one of its biggest mistakes, which is explaining that the Titans release a helpful form of radiation that restore nature. We find out that this has happened in San Francisco and Las Vegas. I think it's an interesting idea that, like, San Francisco and Las Vegas are completely destroyed and abandoned at this point. That's an interesting idea. It's kind of an interesting idea if they were quarantined because of Godzilla's radiation. But of course, Godzilla's radiation isn't like it was in the Toho movies. Here, the Titans all have a helpful, a completely natural form of radiation that restores the environment in a way that isn't real. That's obviously a fantasy concept to make the Titans more mythological and to play into the nature aspect of things, the environmental message a little stronger. I think it does kind of fly in the face of Godzilla's franchise history, but that is what it is. It's an interesting idea that the MonsterVerse doesn't commit to, is my ultimate biggest issue with it. This is a major revelation, and we never revisit this, ever, in another movie. Like, it's never brought up again. Maybe in Supernova, but I highly doubt it, as we'll get there in the future, but like, Rio should be totally destroyed, let alone from Behemoth. Behemoth crosses through Rio in this movie, spreading natural form of helpful radiation. We see none of the effects of that in New Empire, but then we're going to somehow rebuild it again after that attack? Anyways, the containment grid on Isla de Mara goes down. Emma shuts it down and then triggers the Orca. The containment grid is built around a volcano. I love that. I love the setting. I love the framing device. I love, again, playing to a different part of nature's wrath. And Rodan awakens. Again, also playing back into the Easter egg angle, as obviously it's a callback to the original Rodan, who first died in a volcano, but then was reborn in one in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Rodan appears as the fire demon, bursting through the volcano against Madison's protests, splitting her and Emma up. And here it turns out that this was Emma's plan from the start. She came to Jonah. It was always her idea. She uses the Orca to unleash Rodan from his volcano, leading to the peak of kaiju cinema. One of my most popular video essays of all time is about this subject, how great this sequence is. We transition so seamlessly from, like, the entire history of the kaiju genre, from, like, the threat of the kaiju, the scale of them, their attack on humanity, to the battles they have with humanity, with the aerial battle, and then to the kaiju versus kaiju angle, where Rodan takes on Ghidorah. It's so cool. This whole scene's so well done. I love it. And I love the movement. I love the visuals. I love the choreography of it. It's so dope, dude. The Argo tries to lure Rodan away, but his path winds up being a path of destruction straight over the village, destroying a lot of it in the process. And then Rodan battles the G-Team Air Force. It's so cool. The dogfight is sick. Rodan pulls off some epic moves, some thunderclaps, this amazing spin maneuver, and then closes in on the Argo right as it detects Ghidorah is closing in, and it lures Rodan straight to Ghidorah, leading to a major battle between the two of them in the skies. And this is again showing how far our technology has come. With the use of CGI, we can finally pull off a really compelling aerial battle between kaiju, which, to my knowledge, has only ever really effectively been done in one of those previous previous classic kaiju films in the Gamera movies with some aerial battles, but there the CGI was not to the degree it is today. And so here it really is compelling. You know, it's not just monsters smacking into each other, but they're actually battling and scrapping in the sky. It's really cool. During this, again, Mark gets another hero moment, which I can appreciate from a character perspective, showing that even if he's a grumpy man, he's still a great person who will go out of his way to help others and even save someone he dislikes outwardly. You know, Sam Coleman, he saves his life here. It also shows Mark is a man of action as opposed to a guy who's just going to sit there and let bad things happen, which is what he feels he did back in 2014. So it shows how far he's come since 2014. But why is Mark the one that has to do this? They find out that a G-Team Extract Osprey is struggling to get into the Argo, and the Argo is struggling to open the hangar bays to let it in. So Mark goes to solve this problem. He does so. He drops another Osprey onto the hangar bay, opening it up so that the G-Team helicopter can fly in, just as Ghidorah decides to gravity beam Rodan in a brutal move that could have very well been a finisher. Ghidorah starts to pry apart Rodan's wings, and I really thought in theaters, because for one moment, my lizard brain took over and I did not think about where the rest of the movie was heading. I thought Ghidorah was going to rip Rodan's wing off. It was crazy, but instead, he pulls an even wilder maneuver, maybe not even wilder, and gravity beams him point blank into the ocean. He then closes back in on the Argo jet right as they get a call from Admiral Stenz, who's like returning from the last movie in a role that I think is very misunderstood. Stenz does not come across as a villain in this movie the way I used to find him to be. I thought that he came across just straight up as a villain. Stenz isn't trying to kill Godzilla here. Stenz is not trying to undermine Serizawa either. He's saying that Ghidorah and Rodan are two completely destructive forces that absolutely need to be eradicated before they kill human lives, and so he tries to use his oxygen destroyer, which is a new military weapon that they've been developing, to kill these titans. He doesn't know Godzilla's in the area. He has no freaking clue Godzilla's there. It wasn't intentional. The plan was not to kill Godzilla, but Godzilla winds up showing up, because right after the Osprey is rescued, Ghidorah almost destroys the Argo, only to be swept under the ocean by Godzilla, who intercepts him, and it leads to an ocean battle, taking us into the third domain. We fought in the sky, we fought on land, and now we're fighting under the sea, again showing how far CGI technology has come, as this battle isn't just two monsters standing on the ground in a really silly wet to dry scenario where they put a blue filter over and try and make it seem like they're underwater. We really truly get to see these monsters fight in spinning around in the ocean, swimming through the ocean as they fight, and Godzilla shows again. First of all, his dominance in the ocean, that he's actually more powerful in the ocean than he is on land. He has certainly more strategy down there and more options down there, more maneuverability, and his battle experience as he tears off one of Ghidorah's heads. He tears off the left head. And it seems like if Godzilla continues, he might be able to officially defeat Ghidorah here until, the oxygen destroyer hits and explodes, seemingly killing Godzilla. Now, a lot of people take issue with the use of the oxygen destroyer here because it's such an important thing in the Godzilla 1954 movie and in the lore of many Godzilla continuities. And yet here, it's a throwaway military weapon. And I don't think that's entirely giving this movie credit. Yes, it is there for the Easter egg's sake. I do think it's fan service for the sake of fan service. But the oxygen destroyer still serves a purpose. First of all, it is used to kill Godzilla just like it does in the previous film. Of course, Godzilla does revive. Not only he revives himself by going into his radiation chamber, but he's also revived later and rebirthed by Serizawa. But it still serves a purpose. But what it really does is it plays into the idea that Dr. Serizawa, the original, always knew, which is that the oxygen destroyer absolutely should not be weaponized by governments because they're too irresponsible to wield its power. Not only are they too irresponsible to wield its power, but ultimately at the end of the day, he knew that it was a mistake of an invention to create. He knew that this weapon of mass destruction was a mistake, and here it's presented as that, a mistake. In the first movie, there is no real consequence for using the oxygen destroyer other than that Serizawa takes his life out of fear of the consequences that could come from it. We later get consequences of it in Godzilla vs. Destroya in a way that I've always felt kind of undercuts Serizawa's sacrifice, being like, yes, he saved the day back then, but his decision led to the death of many people in the present. I've always felt that that's a little bit of an odd undercut of Serizawa, but I do appreciate Godzilla vs. Destroya and what it was doing with that. This movie presents it as a weapon created by someone other than Serizawa, which I guess people can be upset about, that's fine, but it's presented as a weapon that only has negative ramifications. It kills Godzilla. It destroys the environment around Isla de Mara, and it allows Ghidorah to gain the upper hand and cause the mass awakening. It is ultimately used as what Serizawa back in the original series always knew it was. It's used as a mistake. Also, the MonsterVerse isn't going on forever. I don't know what their plans in the future are, but it's very clear that they never plan on killing Godzilla off. Or at the very least, they don't plan on revisiting that storyline from the original movie. There's gonna be no scene where a scientist heroically sacrifices himself to kill Godzilla using the oxygen destroyer. So what would the point of it be other than this movie's use of it? We're never going to get a proper use of the oxygen destroyer in the way it was originally used. It's never going to happen. The legacy of the oxygen destroyer is never going to be lived up to in the MonsterVerse, so I think it's totally fine to be used in the way it's used here. I don't have an issue with it. We're never going to get the oxygen destroyer properly in the MonsterVerse, so we might as well use it here in the way it's used. I think it's totally fine. I also think it left the door open to introduce Destroya. I don't know how long the MonsterVerse plans on going on, but I know Michael Dougherty was a big fan of the Toho movies. I know he was a big fan of Godzilla vs. Destroya, and I'm surprised that Adam Wingard, who's also a huge fan of Godzilla vs. Destroya, did not capitalize on this. Maybe it's because people are trying to save Destroya for the final installment of this series. I don't know, but it opens the door to introduce one of Godzilla's most iconic enemies, certainly since the Showa series. Again, I have no issue with that. I'm all for Destroya to show up. That's great. And if we get to introduce him through this plot device in Godzilla King of the Monsters, even better. I think that's fantastic. So to all the people who complain about the oxygen destroyer being a throwaway, that's my 2 cents on the matter. And it leads to such a cool scene because that's right, Godzilla's seemingly killed. His heart rate flatlines and it seems he's dead, at least temporarily, which also proves, I guess, the oxygen destroyer might have been an effective tool at killing other titans, you know? They could certainly kill many of the MonsterVerse's titans using it. Ghidorah, like I said, emerges unharmed, landing on Rodan's volcano, regrowing his head and unleashing his alpha call, starting the mass awakening. I think this is the coolest moment in the entire movie. It is so amazing, and that Ghidorah alpha roar is awesome. It's the coolest Ghidorah has ever been. The shot of him on the volcano with the cross in front of him, the devil taking over, it's so powerful. Amazing visual with the lightning striking around him, and that roar is so incredible. The song, A Mass Awakening from Bear McCreary, is so powerful and intense. It's dope. I love it. I think that this whole thing is great. And there we see the Titans all start to rise at once. We spotlight Scylla and Methuselah. It's so freaking cool. It's the coolest scene in this movie as they rise up to reclaim their planet under the wrong guys. They're being controlled for evil, but it is so cool. I love the Titan Age is officially upon us. I'll take this moment to acknowledge something that I haven't really talked about on the channel. This is a really long Godzilla-Thon review. Sometimes they wind up being really long. I appreciate everybody who's sticking with me for this one. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you. So if you have, comment below and let me know if you want me to dedicate a video to this topic. I'm really considering it because I feel passionate about it and because I have a little more personal experience with it than many other people on the outside do, but that is the Methuselah situation. To quickly recap it, I think it's a really frustrating situation that's happened with Methuselah. Methuselah is a Titan introduced here, which I think has a really cool premise of being the oldest Titan on the surface, and basically a mountain come to life. It's kind of an Anguirus type monster. It looks really cool. I love the introduction of Methuselah, the way it rises up. It's so awesome. I love the idea of basically an elemental piece of nature rising up to reclaim the planet. I think it's really frustrating because Summit Kaiju, who is a very popular member of the community, at least used to be a very popular and at one point very well liked member of the community, Summit Kaiju has a monster, the Summit Kaiju, which is their logo, which is a monster with a mountain on its back, or a couple mountain peaks on its back. It's a monster that I've seen, like Dope Pope has done some beautiful artwork rendering, and it's their logo for a while, and they got really mad that they felt that Methuselah looked way too similar, so they lawyered up, they fought Legendary about it, and that lawsuit was, I believe, technically settled out of court, but I'll have to look into it a little more with more detail. But if you want me to dedicate a video to my thoughts on the Methuselah situation, comment down below and let me know. I would love to know. And in that comment so that I know you've made it this far, do a hashtag DForce and do a hashtag Rodandaganda, unrelated to Methuselah, but it's important that we spread the good word of Rodandaganda and how amazing Rodan is. But really, I do have a lot of thoughts on this Methuselah situation. I've met Summit Kaiju personally and talked to them personally about the lawsuit. Like, I have heard firsthand from them about it. I have very frustrating thoughts on the outcome of that. Basically, it seems like Methuselah has been banned from use in the MonsterVerse and essentially erased, you know, like, seems new releases of the MonsterVerse Omnibus erase the artwork of Methuselah that used to appear in Godzilla Dominion. And yeah, I think it's a really frustrating situation because it's not a unique monster. And in fact, I have artwork from the year 2014 that I drew of a mountain kaiju. And I drew many iterations of a mountain kaiju. And you know what I ultimately landed on, because I was really struggling to make it cool, and I have the old artwork to show. I could show it off in a video. I was really struggling to come up with a cool monster, and I decided to base it on Anguirus, and it looks strikingly similar to Methuselah, strikingly similar to Summit Kaiju, and I did it by myself on a camping trip in the mountains way back in 2014 because I was inspired by the fact that I was in the mountains to draw a mountain kaiju. And you know what? That's the same thing that happened with Summit Kaiju. Someone who grew up in Colorado and was inspired by the Colorado mountains to make a monster based on the mountains, and then it looks similar to what I did, the same thing. It's so frustrating, and I could definitely get into it about how I think it was the wrong play. I think that the whole situation ended really poorly. At least what we understand to be the ending of it. If Methuselah returns in the MonsterVerse, that'd be great, but I don't think it's going to happen. There's some more nuance to it than that, but I could get into it in another video if you guys want to hear my thoughts on it. For now, I really got to keep this review rolling because I have been Mr. Yap Central in this one, so I got to move it along here. Hope is reborn in another one of the best moments in this whole movie, and what I have always kind of considered to be my second favorite part of the movie. Maybe not the coolest part of the movie, but maybe my second favorite part, as Dr. Brooks, returning from Kong Skull Island. Super great callback, even though it's a very thankless cameo, played by Joe Morton here, in a great little cameo moment. He goes and meets up with Dr. Ling, the sister of Dr. Chen, the twin sister, and they watch as Mothra emerges as a full-blown adult. Like I said, Hope is reborn through Mothra, an angel with wings that spread under the waterfall and illuminate the night. It's so great. The music is incredible. The Yuji Koseki Mothra theme has never sounded this good before. Oh my god, I love that scene so much. It's so beautiful. It blew me away as far back as the SDCC 2018 trailer, and it remains one of my favorite parts of this movie to this day. Meanwhile, Madison and Emma have a big fight over the Mass Awakening, with Madison blaming Emma for all of this, calling her mother a monster, and rejecting her mother's insane plan. We find out then on the Argo jet that Dr. Chen is a third-generation Monarch. Her and her twin sister are third-generation twins and third-generation Monarch, and they have a long lineage linking back to Infant Island. I love the subtle references to Mothra's mythology and also the beautiful subtle world building that occurred here. She then reveals the history of King Ghidorah, including evidence that he fell from the stars in Alien, making it canon his Showa origins in this timeline as well. So cool. He is not technically a normal rival to Godzilla, but instead he is an invasive conqueror of the planet. We get then that bad gonorrhea joke from Sam Coleman that has almost single-handedly destroyed this movie's reputation with many fans. Is it a dumb joke? Absolutely. Do I find it to be in bad taste? Not really. I just think it's a dumb, bad joke. I don't think it's funny. I think it's not earned. I think that there's far funnier jokes to make about people mispronouncing Ghidorah's name than gonorrhea. Yeah, I don't think that's a funny joke at all, but I don't think it's like as offensive as many fans take it. We then find out Castle Bravo has been completely taken over by the military, and there Admiral Stenz is back, and he's like, guys, I need help. This is really bad. There's a really bad situation, so please help out. Which again shows this movie's attitude overall towards the military is that they're pretty incompetent, and it's scientists who are the real heroes in the real world, as scientists use science tools for science, which is not always true. It's a pretty black and white way to look at it. It's not to say that the military's bad guys, it's just this movie saying that often there's destructive consequences for their actions, which I think there are for scientists as well, but this movie's making a more pure-hearted argument that science is the way forward. So the military's like, scientists, tell us what to do. They're trying to lure the Titans around using nuclear materials, and we see lots of footage of the global rampages the Titans are on, and meanwhile, Mark discovers they're not really acting all that unusual. They're not looking for food, although Mark says they're hunting. They wouldn't actually be hunting at all. What they're really doing is terraforming the planet for Ghidorah, following his lead. Mark claims that Ghidorah is the alpha. All animals respond directly to an alpha. Ghidorah is the new alpha, and it was only Godzilla who could stop him. And so they realized they essentially killed their only chance of saving the Earth, which I think is a really good lesson for someone like Stenz to learn here. It was an accident. He didn't mean to shoot Godzilla with the oxygen destroyer, but it's a good lesson for him to learn nonetheless. Again, I think Stenz is kind of a misunderstood character. I don't view him as a villain at all. Then we see some spotlight footage of Scylla attacking, which is so cool. I love that shot of Scylla destroying Arizona. And then we see Methuselah attacking, which is great. And we see Behemoth, the fan favorite. I've always thought Behemoth was not as cool as the fan base. I've always thought Behemoth was the lamer of the three of those monsters, but Behemoth is still very iconic, and I love me a Behemoth. Very soft spot for Behemoth. That's where we get a spotlight on Behemoth, and I love to see the Titans spotlighted in moments like this. It reminds me of movies like Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla Final Wars in the best of ways. Emma then comes up with a plan to lure all of the Titans to Boston with the help of the Orca, and through that she can study Ghidorah once he's here. She can study Ghidorah and learn how to defeat him, which I don't think is a great plan, as once all the Titans are summoned here, then what? Then what do you do? You're studying Ghidorah. How? He's gonna kill y'all. So I don't think it's the greatest plan, but Jonah Allen tends to agree. He steps in and stops her. He warns her that, like, first of all, that's a bad idea. And actually, interestingly, another thing that the fan base seems to always forget about or misunderstand, Jonah Allen was on Godzilla's side. He is on the side of Godzilla as being the balance and defender of nature. So he is like, him and Emma agree. With Godzilla gone, things have turned out really bad. Ghidorah is a lot worse than either of them wanted. They're both unhappy with the Mass Awakening. They're both not happy with King Ghidorah. But the difference is, Jonah just accepts it and is like, hey, you look, nature's not in our hands, and this is clearly nature doing its thing. We don't have a say here. We don't have the power to do so, and we shouldn't control God. And Emma is like, oh, we messed up, and this is a very easy solution. I don't think it is, but she's like, I think my plan will work. He shuts it down and is like, that's a bad plan. It's not going to work, and it's going to get us caught, so don't do that. Meanwhile, Madison overhears all of this. It's a little bit of a plot convenience that she could tune into that room and listen to them through the radio, but whatever, it's fine. She overhears it and is like, this is a great plan, and as a child would, she plans to go through with it. Mark, meanwhile, plans to leave. This is another thing that I don't think works as well, where it's like, Mark, you're working with Monarch now. What are you trying to leave them for? You got to find the Orca, or you got to track the Orca. But what it really is Mark is having a crisis of faith here. He's really struggling with what's going on. And in one of the movie's really, really great themes, its theme about refinding faith, in this case, is really a religious metaphor for Mark finding faith in a god that he's lost faith in after the death of his son. Mothra arrives as an angel in the sky. She's beautiful. She's illuminating her god rays. She dispels Ghidorah's storm, bringing peace and serenity to the area. She brings a radiant warmth with her. It's amazing. I love that moment. And again, Koseki's Mothra theme is so well used here. They find out through Mothra that Mothra's warning them Godzilla is still alive, and so they now have a plan to go get Godzilla to save the day. Meanwhile, Ghidorah and Rodan nest in and conquer DC. Brutal. G-Team and the military team up to launch a joint attack, while Monarch tells the military what to do, basically being like, give me your nukes, you guys don't deserve them, you've been using them for no good, we're gonna take them, we're gonna use them to revive Godzilla, and it's all gonna be good. We're gonna track Godzilla down through the bioacoustics that Rick Stanton picked up, and we're gonna revive him. And that's what happens. This leads to my favorite scene in the whole movie, which is a quiet moment that nobody likes when I say this is my favorite just because it's so underwhelming, but it's this really quiet scene between Serizawa and Mark talking about Godzilla and faith and their trauma. It's this beautiful moment on the submarine. Serizawa delivers my favorite speech in the movie, and he delivers two of my favorite lines in the entire series. My favorite line probably being, sometimes these moments of crisis are also potential moments of faith. That whole scene is so beautifully written. Yes, it's undercut immediately afterward with a cheesy joke, but I don't think that really lessens the impact of how beautiful that scene is in the dialogue that is exchanged there. I love that scene. I love that dialogue. I love the speech. It's so relevant beyond Godzilla. It's so relevant into real life, into dealing with others, into dealing with your own trauma and your own demons and the world around you. I cannot praise it anymore. I think it's great. The other line that Serizawa says that I think is just amazing, this one's probably actually my favorite line in the entire Godzilla series if I really think about it, is sometimes the only way to heal our wounds is to make peace with the demons who created them. Not really relevant to the overall themes of the Godzilla franchise, but in some ways I guess it is, because like we gotta make peace with nature, which we've been destroying and kind of at war with our whole time as humans, but it really is a personal message that it resonates with me very strongly. I think it's great. The Monarch sub they're in is then pulled into this vortex and sucked into the Hollow Earth. Meanwhile, Madison sneaks out, stealing the Orca and then heading into Boston in order to amplify its signal at Fenway Park to lure the monsters there and follow through with Emma's plan. In DC, it's an apocalyptic wasteland. I do think that the destruction in DC is overblown. Like it's unrealistically destroyed. The flooding is crazy. It's insane. And I always felt like it was wild to do this in movie number 2, Godzilla movie number 2 in this series. Like insane to destroy this much of the planet so quickly and off screen. Like we don't even get to really appreciate the destruction of this place. But what I really appreciate about it and what only dawned on me recently is why DC and why it's destroyed the way it is. It's destroyed in a massive flood. This movie is filled to the brim with religious metaphors and allegories, and in many ways, DC is kind of the home of sin in the United States, and it feels very fitting for it to be washed away with a biblical flood. Now, it happens to be washed away by essentially the devil, but nonetheless, DC is cleansed by the Titans. They got rid of the scum of the earth. Ghidorah might be the bad guy, but I stand by. He's the hero of this scene. This leads to G-Team trying to launch their counterattack against Ghidorah and Rodan, who really have made this place their home, destroying it. It also feels fitting that like Ghidorah nests upon the devil's throne, the capital. Serizawa's sub, meanwhile, finds itself deep in the Hollow Earth, which again is explained here as a subterranean tunnel system that connects the whole planet. Very different than how it appears in the next movie, and again, my preferred version of the Hollow Earth. They discover an enormous ancient temple showing the lost history of the MonsterVerse, this universe. So cool. This ancient, advanced civilization that could build enormous structures bigger than anything we can picture on Earth, and they were able to coexist alongside Titans, worshipping them as the first gods. The temple design is great, the shots are great, it's all amazing. Madison sneaks through an evacuation center in Fenway Park and breaks into their broadcasting booth, where she activates the Orca. The Monarch sub stops before a deep cavern of burning lava filled with lethal doses of radiation. This is where radiation is suddenly toxic again. Through their drones, they discover this is Godzilla's sleeping chamber. This is his home. This is the ancient temple that Godzilla regenerates and evolves in. This has been where he goes between movies each time. This is where he was before the 2014 film kicked off. Another reason why Godzilla was not weakened in that movie. He was at full power in that film. They just beefed his power up for this movie for no reason, just because they want to make him cooler. They actually find out this process could take years, and they can't wait that long. So in order to speed it up, and in a very disrespectful move to Godzilla in the long term as they strip him of a home and his source of nuclear regeneration, they're gonna launch a nuke in there. But uh-oh, the nuke launchers were damaged when they were sucked into Hollow Earth. This is a moment where I feel like any soldier should have stepped up and done this themselves, but I understand Serizawa makes the decision quite hastily, and no one's gonna be like, actually I'll die instead of you. No one's gonna take that upon themselves after someone volunteers it, but Serizawa volunteers to sacrifice himself to deliver the nuke. In many ways, I think he lost the will to live when his best friend Vivian Graham died. You know, there was maybe an implied romance there. Vivian Graham is dead. Serizawa has really lost a lot here. Godzilla essentially died. His god that he believed in has died, and I think it feels very fitting for him to want to go sacrifice himself to revive his god. It's a very meaningful thing for him to do, and also it inspires hope in the people around him in a way where it inspires them to step up and do better and really get behind what he's saying here. Get behind this whole key to coexistence, you know. We find out G-Team is very much losing the war in DC until the Orca broadcast begins. Where we jump to Madison, we see her watching some news footage of all of the Titans around the planet stopping their attacks and heading her way, spotlighting Behemoth and a new Muto. I love the new Muto design. It's kind of a mix between Muto and Muto Prime. Very cool stuff, although actually it was designed independently of Muto Prime, but still very cool. And then, deep in the ocean, Dr. Serizawa says his goodbyes, telling Mark that Godzilla is not only proof that coexistence is possible, but he is the key to it. He passes his notes and legacy to Mark in a way that feels like, God, Mark should have been the main character of the MonsterVerse moving forward. I understand that audiences maybe had some critiques of him, including me, but that doesn't mean you give up on the character and just abandon him. That means you try even harder to write a better story the next time around, but that's not the easier thing to do, so that's not what happens. Serizawa then ventures into Godzilla's temple, activating the nuke and finally coming face to face with Godzilla. He places an actual hand against Godzilla and says the final iconic line, "Sareba Tomayo," goodbye old friend, as the nuke detonates, taking Serizawa's life, but giving life back to Godzilla. The shockwave destroys the entire temple, rest in peace, and also rest in peace those Anguirus bones, and it blasts the sub back upward through the vortex to the surface. There, a whirlpool opens up, and in the most triumphant moment in the MonsterVerse, Godzilla rises with Ifukube's music blasting in the coolest rendition of the Godzilla theme we've ever heard, Rebirth, and Godzilla is supercharged. He fires his atomic breath into the air in a call to arms, glowing not only in his spines anymore, but now in his eyes and through his neck, through parts of his body, crackling through with the atomic energy. So cool. I love that this movie amps up the bioluminescence of monsters like Mothra, a little bit Rodan with the glowing lava through him, Ghidorah with the glowing energy inside of him, and Godzilla, who can flash his spines without needing to charge them up anymore. He can flash them in an intimidation display, which Godzilla does very sparingly in this movie, actually. He does it very sparingly, and it allows Godzilla to glow meaningfully through other parts of his body. I think they overdo it in the next movie, and especially New Empire, where Godzilla glows like a glow stick, but here I think it's really peak. I think it's fantastic, and also this is the best CGI in the whole movie. It looks amazing. Godzilla looks really amazing here. He then leans in and notices the sub getting really close with him and locking eyes with Mark in a very rare Godzilla face-to-face moment. It's really cool, and they're at complete peace. Mark seems to have not forgiven Godzilla, but made peace with him, and Godzilla seems to respect what they have done for him here. It's awesome. Godzilla then returns to sea, hunting King Ghidorah. Mark realizes that the alpha call that Emma has programmed into the Orca must be a combination between Godzilla and a human's bioacoustics. I don't know how this works, but he recreates the sound, and through the recreation, he can somehow trace it to Boston. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me because he has a recording of it already, so like, couldn't you just scan for that recording? I don't know. It's just a MacGuffin plot device. You're not really supposed to think about it, which is fine in a case like this where it's not all that integral to the overall story. You know, it's Mark's motivation, sure, but it's not like a major plot point that many people dwell on. In fact, I think I'm the only person I've ever heard bring this plot point up, and it's because I'm more familiar with this movie than most people. He then declares that Monarch will this time join the fight with Godzilla. It's not a let him fight, but it's a we're gonna join the fight this time. I love that as well. They're gonna join the battle with Ghidorah. Emma leaves Jonah's group to save Madison. She's out of there. And Ghidorah arrives in Boston, bringing with him an epic storm that fills the sky with fog, and it's so cool. He then destroys Fenway Park in search of the Orca, using his gravity beams to melt through the stadium and the surrounding buildings. He chases Madison around onto the green where he spots her, and there he's about to kill her when all of a sudden he's blasted away with a long-range Godzilla atomic breath in a moment very similar to Terror of Mechagodzilla. We wind up revealing Godzilla arriving in Boston, flanked by the military. So cool. After 65 years, Godzilla is finally in a scene teamed up with the military, flanked by them on all fronts, in the ocean and in the sky. So awesome. Monarch joins the battle. They state it's for Serizawa, as Ifukube's Godzilla March plays, and it's played as it's originally intended to be, as a military march. As the military launches their attack on Ghidorah, Godzilla and Ghidorah then charge each other, clashing in the streets. It's so cool. Stanton here analyzes Godzilla and finds out that Serizawa accidentally overcharged him. Godzilla's not only supercharged, he's overcharged. He will go thermonuclear and explode like an atomic bomb in 12 minutes. I think it should have been a little longer, like maybe 30 minutes, but the 12 minute puts a really big stress around all the characters, so I get why it was so short. But again, I do think 30 minutes would be more realistic given the amount of action we see happen here. G-Team and Mark touch down in Fenway. They're trying to search for Madison, and while they don't find her, they do find the Orca, but the battle rages on above them, with many being killed in the process. Before they all die though, things pause for a second, and in a moment where it seems like Dr. Chen has unleashed a telepathic ability to slow down the battlefield, Mothra erupts from the clouds, being the one who was truly behind it the whole time, and webs Ghidorah to a building, allowing Godzilla to tackle Ghidorah through the building. It's the coolest battle move in the whole movie, but unfortunately the power duo of Godzilla and Mothra is immediately split up, as that traitorous Rodan joins the fight, having bowed to Ghidorah back on his volcano and now being Ghidorah's minion in combat. Rodan shows up to take out Mothra while Godzilla takes on Ghidorah. The chaos on the ground continues here, and one thing that this movie is highly criticized for is constantly cutting away from the monster action to the humans, but here is my hot take. It's a hot take I've had ever since my second viewing of this movie. Godzilla King of the Monsters finally has the technology to do something the Toho films never could, which is place the characters and the viewer in the heart of the action. Back in the Toho films, a lot of the time, it's two different people working on it. You have Ishiro Honda filming the live action footage, and then you have, I shouldn't say live action, but filming the human footage, and then you've got Eiji Tsuburaya taking all of the special effects footage, filmed months apart on a soundstage completely separate from principal photography, sometimes combining shots, with matte shots or whatever, composites, whatever they're going to use to combine shots, sometimes integrating people into the shot with the monster, but given the technological limitations, it set a precedent in Godzilla films that as the final battle rolls around, you place your human characters on a hillside or in a faraway building, and they literally just stand there and watch the action play out, and then you cut to the action uninterrupted, watching the monsters do combat. Occasionally cross-cutting, like Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, the movie that this movie is most closely associated with, actually does a lot of cross-cutting as well between the assassin plotline, which is completely unrelated to the monsters. At least here, all of the drama is directly regarding the monsters and their impact on people, even if a lot of it's searching for Madison. And the family dynamic, that's a family dynamic that only exists because of the monsters. In Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is a totally unrelated plotline that's going on. So I think it's silly to criticize King of the Monsters for something that other movies do the same thing in. But anyways, it set a precedent where it continued into the Heisei series. Again, a series where the special effects stuff is happening from a different crew. It's a different crew shot months apart or weeks apart from the principal photography. And so a lot of the characters sit on hills or on buildings and watch the action play out from a distance. The Millennium series, sometimes the people are involved in the combat. Sometimes they're piloting vehicles actively engaging in combat. Sometimes they're in Mechagodzilla. Always, we're at the monster's perspective because that's the one that we can shoot at, and we can't really integrate people onto the streets as effectively. Very rarely in those movies, but for some very effective scenes on those movies, they do put the people on the ground during the attack sequences, during the fight sequences. It's always really awesome when it's done, but it's not done a lot because it was a very complicated and expensive process. For the first time, we have a filmmaker who has the technology to place people in the battle sequences and is embracing it in a way that Gareth Edwards shied away from. Gareth Edwards was all build up, and that's why the payoff moments feel so spectacular, but the payoff was very few and far between, and that's fine. I love Godzilla 2014. I think it's fantastic, but this is a very different approach. This is not saying Ford Brody is in the city during a fight scene. but then we'll cut away to Godzilla and the Muchos battling. This is, they are in the middle of the battle trying to escape the chaos while looking for their daughter. It's a very different premise, and I love it. I've always wanted to be on the ground perspective for a fight scene, you know, a kaiju fight scene of Godzilla taking on a monster. I get why it's frustrating, because we have waited for years to see Godzilla take on these monsters with a Hollywood budget. We've not only waited for years for that, but we've also waited for years for them to return for the first time since 2004 or beyond. I understand the impatience and the desire to have long drawn out kaiju fights. I think this movie is more exciting the way it is. I really like that this movie allows the fight to drag on for like the better part of 30 minutes because there is human drama going on during it. It's not all kaiju fighting, which the Heisei series shows gets boring really fast. This movie continues the drama and the stakes and all of that, while interspersing incredible moments of kaiju battling, but a lot of it is shown through these wonderful ground perspectives, which I get it. They're chaotic. The camera's overly chaotic. Sometimes it can be a little incomprehensible. Sometimes it goes too far. But this is the first time anybody's gotten to embrace this style of filmmaking. I love it. It's different. It's the 35th Godzilla movie. We better be getting something different after 35 of these things. I've seen Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah and Rodan all fight before. I've seen them fight uninterrupted from a hillside. I've seen that movie, and I can watch that movie whenever I want. I've never seen people in the middle of that action trying to escape it. I love it for that. I know that's a hot take. I know people are really annoyed about the cutaways. I get it. I would have liked a little more kaiju action uninterrupted as well. But boy, I'll tell you, I'm glad this movie did something different after 65 years. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the way they're using the technology at their disposal to do something creative. Emma Russell shows up. She rescues the survivors from Fenway Park. She and Mark then realize that Madison's actually heading to their old house, and so they're off to find her. This whole sequence where she's driving around, there's chaos. You know, Mothra and Rodan are slapping planes out of the sky. They're crashing into the ground. It is the most effective at placing the viewer in the streets during a kaiju attack out of, I would argue, any Godzilla movie ever. Or I should say a kaiju fight, because I actually think -1 places you in the attack, a solo attack, a little more effectively because you can see it a little better, but this movie places you in the chaos of a kaiju battle better than any other film, and Godzilla -1 director Takashi Yamazaki clearly agrees, given how much inspiration he's taken from that in Godzilla the Ride Giant Monster, whatever that one is called, you know, the one from 2021 with Godzilla and King Ghidorah. Godzilla and Ghidorah also seem very evenly matched here. Godzilla's supercharged, so he had to get a buff to be able to fight Ghidorah evenly on land, but Ghidorah is at full power here, and so we can see the two of them are very evenly matched for the first time ever. You know, Ghidorah sometimes has a power imbalance where he's supposed to be stronger than Godzilla in the Showa series, but it's never really portrayed all that well, as Ghidorah gets washed in all of his appearances. In the Heisei series, Godzilla creams Ghidorah, so it was nice to see them actually evenly matched in combat. That's really cool. That is, until Ghidorah sucks up all of the city's energy through a transformer and then unleashes this amazing ultimate lightning strike attack with his wings in an incredible visual. It looks so awesome. I love that visual, and it's a move that winds up doing some insane damage, major damage. It nearly knocks out all of the fighter jets from the sky. It scrambles the Argo jet circuits for a moment, and it really wounds Godzilla. The Argo jet then calls off all other military jets from entering the fight because Godzilla's about to explode. Meanwhile, Rodan pins Mothra to a rooftop and nearly kills her. He turns out to be the superior flyer, the superior fighter, and more durable than her, so he nearly kills her, but he's defeated because she's smarter than him. She lures him in close and stabs him straight through the chest with a hidden stinger we didn't know she had. That's a super awesome move. Then she dumps him off into the ground. It's so great. Madison's discovered in the rubble of her house. At first she seems like she's dead, but she is alive, and then Ghidorah pounces on Godzilla, wrapping him up and carrying him into the stratosphere before dropping him back down in this insanely beautiful moment. I love the visuals here. Godzilla collides with the building building, which I think saves his life because it breaks the impact. He explodes against it as well, unleashing all this atomic energy in the process, and hits the ground super hard. Ghidorah then is about to finish Godzilla off, but Mothra sacrifices herself for him, stopping Ghidorah from unleashing a final blast. She jumps in the way, taking the energy. It blows her up, killing her and turning her into mist, a golden energy mist that Godzilla then absorbs in a callback to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1993 with Rodan. Ghidorah then starts to drain Godzilla of his life force, calling back to Godzilla Final Wars, but he is stopped as the Russells work together to repair the Orca. As Mark and Madison Russell and the G-Team survivors therewith are extracted via Osprey, Emma Russell redeems herself from her horrible actions by taking the Orca and luring Ghidorah away, allowing everyone the time needed, and Godzilla himself, to get away and to get back on their feet. So Monarch gets away, Godzilla is revived, transforming into Burning Godzilla. Now with the energy and abilities granted to him from Mothra, he is able to unleash his excess radiation and not kill himself in the process. Ghidorah nearly kills Emma Russell, but is stopped as Godzilla appears, melting Boston around him. This is the coolest Burning Godzilla has ever looked in live action, and it makes sense because he looks like a live action adaptation of Scarlet Godzilla from Godzilla the Planet Eater and Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle. I love Scarlet Godzilla Earth. I think it translates super effectively to live action. This is amazing. And Godzilla uses Mothra's newfound powers to unleash nuclear pulses onto King Ghidorah that vaporize his wings and then the side heads. It's so brutal. Godzilla overpowers him, stomping Ghidorah through the chest, causing him to explode in an electrical explosion and storm and nuclear pulse. It's this giant, crazy destruction. Destroys Ghidorah's body. I think if this was the actual finisher of Ghidorah, I actually would have probably liked it more, because in the aftermath we find out the center head is still alive, showing the resilience of Ghidorah and his regenerative capabilities. Shows how powerful he is. Like, he doesn't even need a body to survive. I guess maybe each neck has its own heart that can keep Ghidorah's heads alive as well. I don't know. I don't know why Kevin died then. I don't know. Maybe it's just a center head ability. Either way, the center head survives, but finds itself being swallowed by Godzilla. It's completely decapitated and in Godzilla's mouth. I've always thought it looks really silly. It's a really silly visual. It's kind of laughable. But then Godzilla makes up for it with the reverse kiss of death. The reverse kiss of death, it's a cool throwback to 2014. It's a cool reversal of it where now Godzilla's blowing the energy through the neck and evaporating the head. It's a cool way to do that, but it feels a little redundant because that's how the last movie ended, and it looks sillier. It's not as cool as well because it's not the first time it was done. So I actually like the finisher on Ghidorah using the nuclear pulses more than I like the reverse kiss of death. But either way, it's a cool moment. And then Dr. Chen warns that Godzilla's only on our side for now, which I always felt like maybe plays into the idea that as nature's balance, that doesn't mean that Godzilla's all that much of humanity's friend. He's the balance of nature, and if humanity continues to throw off that balance, Godzilla will turn on us, but we never really follow up on that. Back to normal now, Godzilla finds himself surrounded by the Titans in the daytime. The storm has completely dissipated, it's sunrise, it's beautiful and orange. It's more brown than orange, but Godzilla's all back to normal, and he's surrounded by arriving Titans. We've got that Muto, Scylla, Behemoth, Methuselah, and that little rat Rodan appears, surviving. He's back again. Rodan will never die. He is the undying immortal phoenix of the MonsterVerse, and he's a badass, man. He's playing both sides here, because immediately he bows to Godzilla, backing down from a fight, but that's because Rodan is a smarter guy than that. He doesn't want to fight Godzilla because he doesn't want to humiliate Godzilla in front of all of his new friends, alright? That's the Rodan-aganda I'm spreading. Rodan's just trying to be polite here. He also feels bad for nearly killing Godzilla's girlfriend, so that's the new canon reason Rodan bows. Okay, I don't want to hear it. With all of the Titans surrounding Godzilla, having just seen him kill King Ghidorah, and with Rodan backing down from the fight visually by bowing, which I've always thought was kind of maybe a reference to the Planet of the Apes movies, where they kind of bow to show their submission in those films. All of the monsters bow to Godzilla, officially making him the king of the monsters visually on screen for the first time properly visualized ever. Godzilla's had that title since 1956, gave him that title specifically actually as a way to kind of cash grab rib off of King Kong. You know, the marketers were trying to capitalize off of King Kong's reputation by saying essentially this monster's the more of a king than even King Kong. So that's actually the reason that that title came about in the first place. But here, visualized for the first time ever, the monsters bow to Godzilla as the proper king of the monsters. And I've always thought it was more metaphorical than anything else. I mean, yes, they're literally bowing to him, but it's more of backing down from an immediate fight. As they showed up unaware of what was going on, they see that going down, and Godzilla standing there basically killing the thing that was just telling them what to do. I've never thought it was like they're all submitting to Godzilla as the alpha, and Godzilla's going to be able to tell them what to do from this point onward, you know? I've always thought it was the monsters are saying, all right, we're not going to fight you right now. We're going to go. We're out of here. The way that, like, I don't know, sometimes dogs will do that. If a dog gets scared, it'll kind of bow. It's not literally bowing to show submission like you're the literal king, but it's bowing to be like, oh, I'm not going to fight that other big dog. That's what it is. The next movies kind of make it literal, but it really is them backing down from an immediate fight in a visual metaphor, making Godzilla the king of the monsters. It's the coolest visual in the movie. I love that moment so much. I love that visual. I love that scene. I just don't love the idea of stripping the monsters of their nuance, which this movie doesn't, because an amazing end credits montage kicks off here, set to a cover of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla done by Bear McCreary and Serge Tankian. It's so badass, cranks up the hype factor of that song to a 54. It is so sick. I love that cover of the song, and we see a montage of the world adjusting to the age of monsters as Godzilla becomes our biggest defender, stopping Titans from destroying cities. It felt like a way to quickly get Godzilla into the role he had in the Showa series, where Godzilla becomes our greatest defender against monsters. And not to say that the monsters are all like out of line because Godzilla's the alpha and they should submit, but to give each monster their own individual personality and motivation. And some monsters are evil, some monsters are going to attack cities because they want the territory. Whatever, Godzilla is here to defend us as a superhero. It felt like we're moving away from Godzilla as nature's sole balance, now saying all of the Titans are actually nature's balance, not Godzilla himself. Godzilla is just a vital function in making sure that balance stays balanced and doesn't tip one way or the other. But Godzilla really became a superhero here, taking on his Showa role. It was really awesome. We also find out a lot of trouble activity is going on around Skull Island, setting up a lot of potential for the future Godzilla vs. Kong to have many problems occur on Skull Island, setting up this epic mythical war between the Godzilla species and the Kong species. Evidence of that is discovered, leading to a cave painting showing Godzilla and Kong fighting. It did feel a little redundant in the post-credit scene of Kong Skull Island. I wish it wasn't a cave painting. I really wish it was something else. Maybe you could do a cave painting, but I wanted to see one shot of the updated Kong design from Godzilla vs. Kong, teasing that he is ready to take on Godzilla. That would have been the best. We then get to the post-credit scene, which originally was going to be the rebirth of Mothra. It was going to see Dr. Chen and Dr. Ling going into an underground secret base in China. There, Mothra was going to be rebirthed with Dr. Chen's daughters, her twin daughters, singing Mothra's song as Mothra comes out of the cocoon. It was going to show that Mothra is going to be back. Instead, they put an Easter egg that a new Mothra egg has been laid because Doherty found out that they wanted to do the Ghidorah skull connection for Mechagodzilla in the next movie, and so he included the post-credit scene for this film, setting up that Alan Jonah comes into possession of Ghidorah's severed head, the one lost in Mexico, the one that Godzilla tore off before the Oxygen Destroyer. Alan Jonah comes into contact with that. Maybe they should have gotten Apex Cybernetics to be the ones that come into possession of the Ghidorah head. It would be a little more, would have been a much cleaner setup to the next movie. It would have given us a lot more to bite onto, and it would have been a little more definitive. But instead, it seems like a very rushed decision made pretty late into production to swap it to this Ghidorah head scene rather than the Mothra hatching scene. Either way, and I know I have some criticism of this movie, which I think shows that I can still look at it and see what works and what doesn't, for me especially, you know. But either way, this is leaps and bounds, in my opinion, the best US Godzilla film by far. I think that this is the best American Godzilla movie made to date. It's the only Godzilla film made from the US that feels like a Toho Godzilla film. It's got Toho fun, Toho sci-fi, Toho themes, Toho throwbacks, a very Toho styled plot. Mostly, it's those themes. The themes feel like they come straight from a Toho movie. It's the fact that this movie feels like it really naturally integrates into the Toho sense of sci-fi and fun and mythicality. It was really cool, and I wish we had stayed in this direction, you know, a nicer balance between sci-fi and fantasy than what comes later. It's also the movie that gives the monsters the most like Toho styled flair. I personally think it's one that treats them the most like the Toho movies do, which is as monsters, you know, which they later become more of cartoonish characters than monsters. But this movie's just the best. I love it, dude. It's the best. It's got the best MonsterVerse Godzilla themes. It's the only MonsterVerse Godzilla movie that feels like it actually has something to say. It's got the best Easter eggs. It was so fun to Easter egg hunt. It's got the best world building. It's got the best Godzilla design and the best monster designs overall. It's got a really good sense between classic monster designs, updating them to make them a little more realistic, but also introducing this mythical element to them. Got the best soundtrack for sure. It's just the best everything that any of these US Godzilla movies have had. I love it. The human story I think is really strong. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I really love the characters. I love the characters. I love the moments between characters. I love the dialogue a lot of the time. I love the interesting dynamics they have with each other. We've got really interesting drama with Alan Jonah and Mark's, you know, his frustrations with Monarch. He's got a really compelling story, you know, refinding his faith in Monarch and Godzilla. It's got a great cast overall. Everybody does an incredible job. They're all doing very well. Great actors. The thing that weighs it down is the over-reliance on quippy comedy that I don't think always lands. And in fact, sometimes it doesn't land so much so that the internet decides that this movie is poorly written because of one gonorrhea joke. The movie is actually, in my opinion, the best written MonsterVerse Godzilla movie to date. I, back in the day, used to say Godzilla 2014 was a better written movie. I don't think that's true at all. The characters in Godzilla 2014 are so flat, so one-dimensional. They only serve their purpose in the plot. We never find out what Ford Brody likes outside of the plot of that movie. Who is he when he's off duty? We know that he wants to bang his wife when he's off duty. Of course, that's not character development. That's nothing. That's not even a character detail that matters. It's just the only thing we learn about him. That's it. That's all we know about him. We don't know anything about those characters beside their role in the plot. This movie, we learn a lot about these characters. They have a real history. The way Mark Russell talks to Serizawa, they have an actual history, a dynamic together. You get the impression that they were friends beyond Monarch. Andrew Russell knew Serizawa. Like, Serizawa was a family friend. Serizawa was deeply connected to them. We know what Mark likes. He's a photographer. That's not relevant to the plot. He likes isolation. He likes the mountains. He likes to fish. He likes to study wildlife. Some of that is relevant to the plot. Not all of it. We learn so much about the cast of this movie that we don't learn about in other US Godzilla movies. It's one thing that I think really separates a well-written character from a not well-written character is, do I know who this character is beyond the movie? And in this case, yes. Most of the characters here, you really get a sense of who they are beyond the movie. With a movie like Godzilla 2014, absolutely not. Movie like Kong Skull Island, very much so. Kong Skull Island's the only other MonsterVerse film that I think does this effective of a job at character development, which ironically, they're the two movies that people like overlook and think don't really spend any time on character development because they're all monster focused, and that's just a misremembering of those movies because at the time they felt way bigger and bolder and more action-focused than Godzilla 2014. And in retrospect, they actually seem quite quaint compared to the movies that came later. The kaiju story is fantastic. I love it. I love the action. I think it's amazing. There's some of the greatest visuals of the entire Godzilla franchise in this film, and there's a lot of them, like so many great visuals sprinkled in throughout. The action beats are fantastic. It's really well paced. The escalation of stakes is great. It's got that Rodan sequence, which is the peak of monster movies. It's got interesting and intentional characterization for the monsters with great dynamics and designs that actually benefit each other. Like the monsters' designs benefit their characterizations, making Mothra a little more mean, making Rodan that lava creature. Like, they've done a lot here that I think really works. It's also the movie that walks the best balance out of, I think, maybe any Godzilla movie between characterizing the monster, giving them an actual characterization and motivation, and preserving their godlike status and their monstrous status. all of the monsters feel like monsters in this movie, with maybe the exception of Mothra, who feels a little more angelic, but like all of the monsters feel like monsters. They all feel very godly. The movie does a wonderful job at that, but they still have characterization. It doesn't take it too far. We do see characterization with King Ghidorah and Godzilla and Rodan and Mothra. We actually do. We get different personalities and dynamics for them, but they aren't over-characterized, over-anthropomorphized to the point where they lose their real kaiju charm. They don't become cartoons. It's a really tricky balance to walk, and this movie nails it. Obviously the music, you guys don't really need me to gush about the music, you all know it. Bear McCreary kills it with the soundtrack. The music is really great. The instrumentation is very intentional. His use of Ifukube and Koseki's music is amazing. How it doesn't sound out of place in this very modern soundtrack and very epic soundtrack. All of it is so cohesive. And the visuals and VFX. This is, I would say, the movie's weakest point, while delivering some of the greatest visuals of the entire Godzilla series, and again, many of the greatest single frames of the entire Godzilla series, and having brilliant concepts, placing the viewer in the heart of the action in a way that special effects have never allowed before. I do concede this movie is very cluttered, very busy, very chaotic, and a lot of the time it muddies its own beauty through the cinematography. The overactive camera, the shaky cam, the overemphasis on elemental effects, and obscuring the frame, as they call it in film, dirtying the frame through placing things in the foreground or having things fly through the frame or having a helicopter come and obscure the monsters, completely eating up the entire frame or whatever. Too much going on that creates too much chaos and confusion and leaves the viewer ultimately feeling unsatisfied, even though this movie features the kaiju fighting in the final battle more than Godzilla vs. Kong has Godzilla and Kong fight in the final battle. It's just that movie does it uninterrupted, and so it feels like we get more of it. But that's not even true. This movie gives us a longer final battle between the monsters. I do agree, there are some flaws with this movie. Mark Russell's a little too smart for his own good. He solves a little too many issues. The comedy doesn't always land. There are some plot holes that I think could be poked, but I don't really think any of them matter, to be honest with you. I think they're all very easy to excuse. Every movie has plot holes, every single one of them. Decisions that characters could have made differently that they should have, and whatever. Every single movie. I think that these movies are fairly easy to overlook, and the visuals, I do concede, are overly chaotic, but I agree with the premise of them and why they were so chaotic and why they were the way they were. Which is why I'm happy to give Godzilla King of the Monsters the same rating I gave it back in 2019, which is very rare for me to hold a consistent rating on a movie for this many years. I'm giving Godzilla King of the Monsters a 9 out of 10. I think it is a perfect adaptation of the Showa Godzilla films with some of their flaws included. It's a wonderful revisit and return to and celebration of the Godzilla films that have come before. It still does new and creative and interesting things in the process. I love this movie. I think it's the best Godzilla film of the MonsterVerse. I think it's the best US Godzilla movie ever made, and I kind of wonder if it'll ever be topped. I hope it will, but I don't know. I wonder if any US Godzilla movie will ever top it. I will eagerly wait to find out, though. That is where I will leave it for this one, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I know I had so much to say about this movie, but it is the Godzilla movie I have the deepest connection to. I don't have as much to say about the next one, for instance, so we'll see how long that review winds up. But thank you guys all for watching. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for watching. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man out.